You might have looked at this title and thought, who the hell is Hachim Mastour? And the fact that that is once again the most common reaction to his name proves just how insane it is that he managed to become one of the most talked about wonder kids in the world back in 2013, even getting himself a contract at AC Milan. The way he unintentionally exploited the early years of the internet to propel himself into stardom and convince the world he would be the next all-time great, only to end up as far as possible from fulfilling those expectations, is not only impressive, it's also one hell of a story. So welcome to the life of Hachim Mastour. Normally I tell you about the story of the player's childhood before I get into the main point of the story, but Mastour was special in many ways. First, it truly seemed to have come up out of nowhere. Little else is known about him besides the fact that he lived in the city of Reggiana in Italy with his parents and that he was of Italian-Moroccan descent. And second, he just became famous so early on that there's basically no childhood to be mentioned. In a way, the speed at which he rose to the top was one of the main reasons that led basically no one to have time to really watch him thoroughly or try to call him out earlier. You see, in 2012 the internet wasn't what it is today. Here in Southern Europe, most of us were still getting acclimated to it. I'm pretty sure that back then I was yet to have unlimited Wi-Fi in my own house, but still the internet was there and the whole virality aspect of it was making its way into football and its culture. And so came one video titled "The Best 14-Year-Old in the World." The title could not be more simple. It showed us the skills of a young boy from Reggiana who, despite playing for his local club, had joined Inter Milan for some tournament as a sort of tryout since it was illegal at the time for such a young player to be transferred. And even after all this time and knowing what happened, it's hard to look at that video and not think, damn, that kid is going to be amazing once he gets his shot. His touch is so silky smooth, his skills are so effortless, he seems to find space where there seemed to be none. He seems to be above and beyond the level of the other kids on the pitch, the sort of talent that comes once in a generation, and well, that was what everyone else seemed to believe back then. How could they not? It was so impressive that over the weeks that followed, the video gained millions of views. Everyone kept showing it around and sooner than later, it reached the eyes of many of Europe's top clubs. Inter had more than enough reason to be frightened, because from now on, once he became of age, Mastour could sign for nearly any club he might have wanted. But there's one thing about exceedingly young talent in football. Their transfer follows a similar path to the call-up of academy players to their respective first teams. They mainly occur in clubs who are struggling financially. After all, if you can't pay top dollar for quality players, you gotta find some solution, right? Well, back then one of the clubs in the race for his transfer was far more desperate for some miracle solution to their problems than anyone else. I'm talking about none other than Inter Milan's rivals AC Milan, who after all would even take special joy in stealing this acclaimed talent from them. AC Milan were clearly struggling back then. Compared to the legacy left behind by them over the 2000s, they were damn near embarrassing in 2012. Once the next season started, they were supposed to rely on unprepared young talents like Niang, Balotelli, El Shaarawy, and stars that were clearly past their prime like Kaká and Robinho. And you know how it is, when you're desperate for a miracle, you tend to believe that anything that comes your way might just be one. And it didn't help that the legendary AC Milan coach Arrigo Sacchi would not shy away from making it public that he was a big admirer of the young man and had been highly impressed with the video. From there on it was full-blown madness, and soon a desperate AC Milan had spent an incredible €500,000 to get Reggiana to let go of their most prized young player. Upon his arrival, some kinks were worked out as he was still too young to formally play for AC Milan in some situations, but soon he would get to frequently join their youth teams in their matches, and as the UEFA website put it was virtually impossible to mark for any defender of his age. As you might imagine, no one hesitated to record him and post it online, and soon enough, all sorts of compilations started going viral. If that one video had been the ignition, the Mastour hype train was now going at full speed. He was a sensation, his fame seemed to snowball every day, and suddenly he was sponsored by Red Bull, who would constantly post videos of his insane skills, even pairing him up with Neymar at one point. Like, yeah sure, Neymar had at that point been in Europe for only a few months, but still, do you get just how much hype there needs to be behind a 15-year-old's name for him to be put beside a soon-to-be all-time great who was already proving himself at the highest level? Clearly the phrase, "do not believe everything you see on the internet," had not yet been created. By the end of the 2013-2014 season, AC Milan showed him a sign of good faith and called him up for the last match of the season, though he would stay on the bench. As the next season started, he got to play a few friendlies against the likes of Real Madrid and Manchester City, and even got called up on the first match day of the season, though once again, he would not get any minutes. It's more than obvious now that somewhere along the way, someone must have realized that as much as he was able to humiliate his opponents in the youth tiers, once the opposition was of another level, all of his trickery was rendered useless. Mastour was the one true show pony, and he had unintentionally used the early years of the internet to scam everyone into believing he was the real deal. So much was the case that even the Moroccan national team, scared that soon enough they would have no way of convincing the kid to say no to Italy in their favor, would decide to offer him a place with them despite him being just 16 years old. Mastour, probably over the moon over the possibility of playing international football, would instantly say yes and would play for 2 minutes against Libya. 2 minutes that meant there was now no way of going back on his decision. 2 minutes that would become especially sour once he realized they would never call him back again. When I read the story of his early years, one name always stands out to me: Mino Raiola. Somewhere along his path, Mastour had signed with the most infamous and cutthroat of football agents, and that perfectly explains his shocking next move. I think we should all agree that as a 17-year-old, if you're struggling to take the step into the first team at a club like AC Milan, the clear decision is to take the fall and go back to the academy, focus on your weaknesses and how you can improve them, and try again later. It's honestly that simple, or at least it seems to me that it is. Regardless, that wasn't Mastour's opinion, and I have a feeling it had something to do with Raiola, who's always been a trigger-happy agent. The next season, he would shockingly decide to request a loan move, and the unfortunate receivers of this immature superstar were Malaga, who seemed to be either coming back down to reality from their overachievements in the early 2010s, or maybe hoping that Mastour would be the key to a return to those times. Well, in reality, it turns out that the signing of Mastour was just another transfer done on a whim after their billionaire Qatari owner decided it was the next best thing. It really seems that the more the kid needed someplace safe and grounded, the more he would be thrown into the wolves, having to deal with the least straightforward of transfers, with never-ending expectations. At the very least, in November he would get his competitive debut, showing up for 5 minutes against Betis. At the time, many were happy, thinking this was a great sign of hope, but let me tell you, those were the only minutes he would ever play with Malaga. Soon after, he would be sent to their B team and then their academy, as the coach would soon tell everyone that despite his talent, Mastour was never a player that he personally was interested in including on his project. By the end of the year, the 2-year loan with an option to buy would be cut short and Mastour would go back to Milan. But upon arrival, he would quickly realize that maybe that was not such a good idea. The once very enthusiastic fan base now seemed very unwelcoming, refusing to believe the player was anything more than a once-upon-a-time internet star. But of course, as there often is, there would be one last glimmer of hope. PEC Zwolle from the Eredivisie, a league often recognized for their way of carving out the kings found in the roughest of diamonds, was interested in giving him a shot at becoming the player he once thought he was. He got to play 6 matches over that season, around 150 minutes, and the conclusion everyone took from that time was quite simply that the pressure of living up to the clips that had once made him famous had completely distorted his sense of what football truly was. With every touch of the ball, Mastour seemed to want to take on all the players who dared to oppose him. It really seemed like every one of his actions had only the goal of going viral once more, rather than actually, actively and meaningfully contributing to the game. It seemed that the ball was glued to his feet, and not in the good Lionel Messi type of way, more like that one kid in your middle school was convinced that football was like FIFA Street, and that if he did 5 elasticos in a row, he would get some sort of combo. As you might imagine, by the end of the season, as his once sparring partner Neymar joined PSG for an unimaginable world record fee, Mastour would once again come back to Milan, where he was told that he wasn't wanted, but also that they wouldn't stop him from just staying around. And so, the player who had once been referred to as the future of Milan now found himself questioning whether he had any future at all, with no offers coming up. Eventually, as his contract ended after one more year, Mastour found himself moving to Greece, joining Lamia in hopes of reviving his career. By December, he had made 6 appearances, but an injury meant he had to come back to Italy to recover. And then, well, this is one of the things in his career that really pisses me off. He just went missing. The club stopped hearing from him, he wouldn't show up anywhere, he wouldn't pick up calls, nothing. It wasn't until the club mentioned they were ready to take things to court that he showed up again 2 months later, finally willing to terminate his contract. I get that 6 matches in the Greek league over a handful of months wasn't what the great Mastour expected of himself, but to just leave the club empty-handed like that, completely disrespecting their agreement, is self-centered and extremely childish in my opinion. And so, of course, came everyone's favorite trope. Mastour found himself helpless with nowhere to go and no one who believes in him anymore, and so comes the unexpected offer to play in his homeland for a smaller club. Mastour joins Regina in the Italian 3rd tier, and after a season of God knows what, because honestly, does he really need nearly a year on the sidelines before finally making an appearance for a club who just got promoted to the 2nd division? Who knows, but regardless, he would only get to actively play in the 2020-2021 season, where he would actually get 11 appearances over its first half, which is nearly as many as he had gotten over the entirety of his career, but regardless, he still got loaned out to Carpi, where he would finally get to play in the 3rd tier, and most importantly, where he would finally, after 8 years of playing professionally, he would get his first competitive goal. At this point, Mastour finds himself at a new low. A few months ago, Carpi sent him back to Regina, who chose to terminate his contract, leaving him without a club. And what's sad about all of that is not the fact that his career might just be over if no other club steps up to the plate, but in reality that it seems barely any news outlets cared enough to even try to get a statement from him, or any more information besides what was handed to them in Regina's Twitter statement. I used to worry that the world would one day forget about Mastour, but what happened is much worse, because it's not that we don't remember him, it's more that we just don't care anymore. And for a second, let's just say this is the end. Mastour finishes his career with 34 competitive matches over 8 seasons, scoring just 1 goal and providing 2 assists, little over 1,000 minutes on the pitch, no trophies or awards to his name. Looking back now, it looks to me that he really was just a showboat, because honestly that's all he wanted to be. Clearly that was his only passion when it came to football. He enjoyed the art of dribbling and doing it beautifully, but he lacked the heart, the strength, the dedication, the ambition, and pretty much all else that was needed to make of him a great footballer. And you know what? In part that reminds me of someone. Well, it reminds me of myself. Before the age at which Mastour was discovered, I was on the same situation as him. I was yet another kid who had spent countless hours developing a bunch of intricate little dribbles and tricks, and though they were impressive and worked quite effectively against kids my age, I felt that the higher the stakes were, the least effective they were. It wasn't until after I decided to quit football that with age I grew to be stronger, faster, more competitive and ambitious, and that I realized what it truly meant to do good on the pitch. And I just feel like the flood of praise he received back then, when he was far from realizing that, led him to be stuck there. After all, if people like to watch him so much, then how could he possibly not be good enough? Surely it isn't his fault, or at least that might be the sort of thought that is stopping him from progressing as a footballer. Maybe if that day Mastour had fell ill and missed the match, maybe if the Inter scout had a flat tire and didn't show up, Mastour would have stayed back at Reggiana, lived a normal life and developed the grit that is necessary in order to become a great footballer, and we would now be witnessing his rise to stardom as a more complete version of himself. But hey, though I don't have much hope left for him, he is still only 23, as hard as it may be to believe. Maybe one last shot with someone who can show him what he is missing could be what will launch him back on the right path. But above all, what truly matters is that Mastour's future only depends on himself. Meanwhile, I have to thank Skillshare. They're the sponsor of this video and they have been massive help for the channel. If you don't know them, they are an online learning community which offers classes on pretty much any subject you might be interested in. They can be great help for sure if you want to better yourself or learn something new. Skillshare is the perfect place for you. From my time at the website, I found it to be super easy to use and the content to be really cool. I'm still going on about ideas on how to expand my horizons as a creator. In the class, YouTube Success, Script, Shoot and Edit by Marcus Brownlee has been amazing. It's really hard for me to find other creators I can interact with, and this class allowed me to get outside perspective from someone who I can relate to. I promise, no matter what you're looking for, Skillshare is something for everybody. And now you can even get a 1-month free trial, so you really should just go ahead and click the first link in the description. Why not? It's free and it helps out the channel. So yeah, this was Mastour's career in a video. Once again, kind of a different one. I've been making kind of a lot of weird videos, but regardless, I hope you enjoyed, and if you didn't forget to like and subscribe because it really helps out the channel. And yeah, I'll see you next time. Bye.